Hey friends, Ash here with Gents, and today I'm going to be going over with you guys my top 10 most complimented fragrances of 2019. We've got a few niche fragrances here. Most of these are designer fragrances, which is probably not a big surprise. Designer fragrances typically are going to be made to be more mass appealing, which means it's going to appeal to more people, which means you're going to pull more compliments typically with that type of scent. We've got a lot of stuff to go over here today, so let's jump right into this. Before I start this countdown, I also need to talk to you guys really quickly about compliments with fragrances. Sometimes some people will make it seem like you'll pull a compliment every 30 seconds with a particular fragrance, and that's just not the case. That's not really how compliments work, at least not in my experience. Most of the time you're going to pull compliments from people that you already know. So that's going to be friends or family or coworkers or people you go to school with, whatever. People that you've already had contact with, people that already know you, even if it's just on a kind of an acquaintance type level, those people are going to be the ones that give you compliments more often than not. Now, some people are going to be able to pull compliments easier. People that have jobs like a DJ or bartender or something like that, where you're constantly meeting and talking to new people, oftentimes people that are going to be more social. But for your average person, compliments are not going to come very often from people that you don't know. Another thing with compliments, and I've talked about this in the past, if you're not very outgoing, if you're very introverted, if you keep to yourself, if when you go out, let's say to a grocery store or just anywhere, if you're the type of person that has earbuds in, if you're kind of keeping to yourself, not making eye contact, stuff like that, don't expect people to approach you and say, hey, you smell great, what are you wearing? Because you don't look very approachable yourself. So also keep that in mind. It could be that somebody thinks you smell amazing, but if you're not looking very approachable, and if the person that thinks you smell amazing is not very extroverted themselves, they may not come up to you and say anything. They may just think it and keep it to themselves. With that out of the way, let's jump into my top 10 most complimented of 2019. Number 10 is a fragrance that I've talked about a lot in the past. If you've watched this channel for a long time, you'll know it's one of my favorite fragrances of all time, which means that it gets a lot of wear, which in turn means there are a lot of opportunities for compliments. And it's this one, Creed Green Irish Tweed. It has violet leaf, lemon verbena, iris, ambergris, and sandalwood as the notes in the scent. This fragrance, at this point, is over 30 years old, and yet you can still pull it off with ease. It doesn't come across smelling dated. Instead, it smells clean, fresh, and sophisticated. I've said this a bunch of times. You've probably heard this a bunch of times if you're familiar with that fragrance, but it was made to smell like a walk through an Irish countryside. So that gives you a decent idea of how it comes across. It's very green, and as I said, very fresh. Green Irish Tweed is a fragrance that's going to work great in spring and summer, especially during the day. You can wear it casually, you can wear it formally, you can wear it to the office. It's extremely versatile. And this is a fragrance that pulls compliments where people say, oh, you're smelling nice today, or you smell good. It's not really the type of fragrance, at least in my experience, where people will say, oh, you smell sexy. It's not that type of compliment puller. Still yet though, Green Irish Tweed, number 10 on my list of most complimented fragrances for this year. It's gonna take me to number 9, which is another niche fragrance on this list. Another one I've talked about a lot in the past, and one that my wife absolutely loves. It is Parfums de Marly Layton. This one has vanilla, apple, cardamom, and lavender as some of the notes in the fragrance, and where Green Irish Tweed is more that type of fragrance that has you smelling fresh and people say, oh, you smell nice. This is the type of fragrance that gets compliments where people say, oh, you smell sexy, you smell awesome. Also, I need to mention this really quickly before I go further. Creed Aventus is not on this list at all. So I'm gonna let you know that right away. The reason it's not on the list is because at the beginning of this year, I did a fragrance New Year's resolutions video. One of my resolutions was not to wear Creed Aventus. So it didn't wind up in any list this year. I didn't talk about Creed Aventus. Now there's a fragrance coming up on this list really soon actually that smells similar to Aventus, but as far as Aventus itself, can't really make the top 10 most complimented list if I wasn't wearing it, which is why it's not in the list this year. It's not because I hate Creed Aventus, it's just because of that resolution. That's why it's not here. So back to Layton. This one is sweet, it's warm, it's got a really sexy touch of spice with that cardamom, and as I said before, this is one that women love off of me, especially, again, my wife and her friend. Performance on that one, very good, and as far as Parfums de Marly fragrances go, that one gets the most wear from me personally out of all the ones that I own. I also think just in terms of smell that it's up toward the top, the upper echelon of Parfums de Marly fragrances, up there with probably Carlisle at the moment for me personally. Parfums de Marly is one of those niche houses that takes their fragrances and gives it designer mass appeal. So while they are niche fragrances, they're going to appeal to the vast majority of people that smell them, and Layton is no exception to that rule. That's gonna take me to number 8, and I just said I didn't wear Aventus this year, which is true, but I did wear this. Mont Blanc Explorer. Bergamot, Akigala wood, Ambroxan, and vetiver. Some of the notes in this fragrance, and when this first came out, the fragrance community kind of crapped all over it because it is essentially Mont Blanc's take on Aventus, turning Aventus into basically a designer type fragrance. So this one is not super unique since it is inspired by Aventus, and it's pretty obvious that it is. Still yet though, it is a very appealing, extremely versatile fragrance that will easily pull you compliments. Instead of going the pineapple route that Aventus does, this one instead goes bergamot heavy in the opening, which many clones or inspired by fragrances of Aventus will do. So sometimes the way the bergamot is used in fragrances like this can come across a little bit like pineapple, and that's what you've got going on here. Then of course you have the Ambroxan that's used in here. Ambroxan is a note that is loved by the vast majority of people out there, which is why it's used so heavily in men's fragrances nowadays, Ambroxan and amberwood, especially lately. Explorer is just easy to wear. It's like a designer Aventus, as I said, and it was the 8th most complimented fragrance this year for me. Number 7 is a Mugler fragrance, in my opinion, one of the absolute best from the Amen line. This one and Pure Havane. So you probably already know what this fragrance is. It's Pure Malt. So like I said, Pure Malt, Pure Havane, those are the 2 best Amen fragrances in my opinion. Some people really love Ultra Zest and they'll pay an extreme premium for that now that it's hard to find. Other people love the original Amen, but for me, Pure Malt, Pure Havane, those are the 2 best. It has whiskey, peat, fruity notes, and of course, malt as some of the notes in this fragrance. Essentially what this is a very sweet, warm, boozy style of scent. Fragrances like that work especially well for me in terms of pulling compliments. In the past, I've worn Pure Havane more than Pure Malt, but this year I switched it up a little bit, and in circumstances where I would have reached for Pure Havane, I wore this one instead. That actually works very well pulling compliments in the office for me. Not really what you would expect as an office fragrance. Oftentimes that'll be something like Prada L'Homme. That one gets constantly thrown out as one of the better office fragrances, and I agree, it is. But in the office for me, this one is fantastic. Typically with women, at least in my experience, sweet and fresh fragrances are typically the ones that pull the most compliments, at least for me. So it's either really nice and sweet, warm and cozy and sexy, or it's fresh and brisk, and those 2 things seem to work out great. Pure Malt, on that sweeter side of things, great compliment puller. Number 6 is a fragrance that you might not really think of as a compliment pulling fragrance when you think of big compliment getters, but for me, it has worked great this year. This is a niche fragrance. It's one that years ago in the fragrance community got a good amount of hype, but doesn't get talked about quite as much anymore. It's this Amouage Jubilation 25, and it smells great. Honey, myrrh, blackberry, oud, and a papanax are some of the notes in this fragrance. So this does go a little bit with what I was just talking about with the sweet side of things being a potentially big compliment pulling factor in a fragrance. This does have sweetness. You've got the fruity blackberry, you've got honey in here, and then you have resinous notes like myrrh and a papanax. So you have a lot of different sweet facets in the scent. But then you have things like oud as well, which adds depth and more complexity. It is the type of fragrance that you have to wear with confidence. Amouage Jubilation 25 is not the kind of fragrance that you spray on and then you project yourself as a meek or quiet person and go stand in the corner and expect anybody to think you smell nice. Jubilation 25 demands attention. It does. So when you wear that, you have to have the confidence to pull it off. When you're walking by people and you know that they're picking that fragrance up, you can't be doing it kind of shy and unsure of yourself. Do that, people are probably gonna think that you don't smell very nice. But if you do it and you command attention and you're put together well, people are gonna take notice. Jubilation 25 has worked wonders for me this year with compliment pulling. It's one that I like to wear with the suit, dressed up, more formal situations, in cooler weather. So we're talking fall and winter, and I wear it both day and night. So there we go, number 6, Amouage Jubilation 25, fantastic smelling fragrance. That's going to take me to number 5. This one is one that I have talked about a little bit, especially here lately. It's an extremely popular fragrance, especially with middle-aged guys out there. It's got a good amount of sophistication to it. It's a vetiver-based fragrance, and vetiver works so well in so many different situations. Not a huge surprise that this one is a massive compliment puller. And this is my enormous 200 milliliter size bottle of Hermes Terre, and this is the Eau de Toilette. Orange, vetiver, pepper, grapefruit, some of the notes in this fragrance. This one is known for having an earthy kind of vibe to it. A dirty orange is how it's often described in the opening, and as I said before, it's based around vetiver primarily. Some people are going to be turned away from this because of the opening. The dirty orange, as I said, a lot of people don't go for that. They get turned off by it and they think, oh, I don't want that. I want something that smells clean. I want something that smells fresh. Oftentimes, especially with casual guys out there, they're gonna go for something either super easy to wear and sweet or super clean and aquatic. And this does not fall into either one of those camps. And I know I said before that sweet fragrances oftentimes are gonna be the big compliment pullers, or your fresh, brisk ones, your blue fragrances. But Terre for me is great at pulling compliments. It is sophisticated. It's a gentlemanly kind of fragrance. It's one that works very well in the office, one that works very well formally, but it has enough versatility that you can easily wear that casually as well. Nearly a year-round fragrance, though in summertime, you'd probably want to go for the Très Fraîche version of Terre. That being said, the Eau de Toilette, to me, is the most versatile of the bunch, at least as far as being able to be worn in springtime, fall time, wintertime, daytime, nighttime, casually, formally, to the office, whatever. And once that dries down, it smells fantastic and pulls compliments for me very well. We are at number 4. This is a fragrance that's been talked about a lot on YouTube. It's been reviewed a lot. It's made a whole bunch of top 10s. And there's a reason for that. And it's because it is a big compliment pulling fragrance. It has good longevity, good projection. It smells fantastic, in my opinion. Very easy to wear, especially in cooler weather. Viktor and Rolf Spicebomb Extreme. Vanilla, tobacco, cinnamon, saffron. Some of the notes in this fragrance. I've talked about this one a lot here lately, so I won't go into too much detail here, but Spicebomb Extreme essentially takes the Spicebomb DNA, adds vanilla, sweetens it up a little bit, makes it more approachable, makes it easier to wear, takes that spice and dials it back just a little bit so it's not quite as in your face. This essentially takes Spicebomb, the original, in my opinion, and improves upon it. It makes a few tweaks. It's not drastically different. You're not gonna smell them side by side and go, oh wow, they're nothing alike. They're very similar, it's just Extreme is better. Big compliment puller, women love that fragrance, and it just works very well, especially this time of year, which is why it made my winter top 10 list. So number 4, Spicebomb Extreme. We are now in the top 3 compliment getting fragrances for 2019. And I know what some of you are possibly thinking, where are the blue fragrances? Because I'm always told blue fragrances pull compliments so well. And yeah, they do. They do pull compliments really well. And there are some blue fragrances coming up here very shortly. So if you were hoping there were going to be none, I'm sorry to disappoint you. But the fact of the matter is that the really high selling, mass appealing blue fragrances that I'm going to mention here are really high selling and mass appealing, and that's because they pull compliments like crazy. They sell and people love them. So it shouldn't really be a surprise when these fragrances are right toward the top of the compliment pulling fragrances that I wore this year. Number 3. This one got hated on extremely when it came out by the fragrance community, I should say. The mass public, they loved it, but the fragrance community did not. They've warmed up to it a bit on websites like Fragrantica. Still, yeah, when this was first released, it got a lot of hate. And it's Dior Sauvage Eau de Toilette. It's got Ambroxan, bergamot pepper, and Sichuan pepper as some of the notes. And what can you say about Dior Sauvage? It is a massive compliment puller. It just is. If you've smelled it before, you're going to immediately recognize that metallic Ambroxan opening that it has. It's got the double pepper going on, the black pepper and Sichuan pepper that mix in with that metallic Ambroxan, and of course the bergamot in the opening. It is attention grabbing, extremely attention grabbing. When you wear this fragrance, people are going to notice you. And while they'll notice you with fragrances like Jubilation XXV, that one is a little more of an acquired taste, and it works in far fewer situations than a fragrance like Sauvage Eau de Toilette. You can wear Sauvage basically anywhere and people are going to like it. And what's funny about fragrances like Dior Sauvage is you would think, oh, these guys with these huge collections would never wear Sauvage. But that's actually not true. In situations where you're going somewhere where you're going to be around a lot of people and you're not sure of what to wear and you're about to run out the door, if you grab something like this, you know it's going to work. And I've actually spoken to other reviewers with collections like this, where you would think they would not wear fragrances like this, and they've told me that they've actually gone through multiple bottles of Dior Sauvage. So while this gets hated on by some people, it serves a purpose and it does it so well. Dior Sauvage Eau de Toilette, my number 3 most complimented fragrance of this year. That takes me to number 2. This is one I've worn a lot, which is one of the reasons it's so high up on this list. This is my favorite release designer-wise 2019, so you may already know what it is. Armani Code Absolu. Tonka, vanilla, suede, nutmeg, woody notes. Some of the notes in this fragrance. This essentially takes Code Profumo, takes that DNA, and switches it around a little bit, finds it, and improves upon it, in my opinion. This has a good amount of sweetness in it from the Tonka and vanilla. It's not quite as in your face as Code Profumo is. In my opinion, this one can be used for nearly any situation in cooler weather, and I like the fragrance so much that I'd probably wear it in spring, maybe even summer as well. Like Armani Code Profumo, Code Absolu is a big compliment puller. So if you have Code Profumo, if you've worn Code Profumo, then you know that that is a good compliment pulling fragrance, and this one I've actually had better luck with than Profumo. As I mentioned, this one definitely has that Code Profumo DNA. If you've never smelled Absolu and you spray this on and you spray Code Profumo on, you'll immediately recognize the similarities between the two. But if I could have only one, it would be this one, and it is not close. Talked about that fragrance a lot here lately, so I'm gonna leave that as it is and go to number 1 most complimented fragrance of 2019. And in actuality, number 1 is 2 fragrances. I put these 2 fragrances together because if I didn't, they would have most likely been at 1 and 2, and I didn't want that to be how the list wrapped up, so I just put them in together. It's YSL Y Alive and YSL Y Eau de Parfum. So yes, double Ys. I am fully aware that the fragrance community hates on the Y line. YSL Y, by hardcore lovers of fragrance, they look down on this line. But for me, I think that it's awesome for what it's trying to do. These fragrances are extremely versatile. You can use them almost any season, any situation, and pull crazy compliments. Y Eau de Parfum has apple, sage, nutmeg, and amberwood as some of the notes. Y Live has apple, ginger, juniper, sage, and bergamot as some of the notes. A very simple way to break down Y Live, and this is, again, very, very simple, is if you took Y Eau de Parfum and you added some Invictus DNA, maybe Invictus Aqua, Invictus Legend, something like that, you would end up with Y Live. So this one is gonna be a little sweeter, a little fresher, more for spring, summer use, potentially fall as well. Y Eau de Parfum is, to me, nearly a year-round fragrance. Honestly, I do use it year-round. Daytime, nighttime, casual, formal, date, either one of these work in all of those situations. I've reviewed both of these fragrances in the past on this channel. For me, of the current crop of blue fragrances, these two are my favorite, which is a crazy thing to say because I don't particularly like the Invictus DNA. That's why I don't wear it, but the way that it's kind of introduced a little bit in Y Live works for me. And truth be told, these two fragrances have gotten me more compliments this year than all the other 9 on this list combined. That's not hyperbole. That's not me trying to hype these fragrances up. It's just these work so well off my skin. And these two are the most complimented fragrances of the year for me. Y Eau de Parfum, Y Live. Some people are not going to like that, but they crush it at being mass appealing. They really do. So there we go, guys. My top 10 most complimented fragrances 2019. Let me know in the comments below what your most complimented fragrances are for this year. And as always, thanks so much for hanging out with me today. I appreciate all your support. I'll see you again tomorrow with another fragrance video. See you guys.